Välkomna hit! Jätteroligt att se att så många finns med oss här idag. Både här i salen och även på webben, hoppas vi. Jag heter Lena Strålsjö och jag jobbar med forskning och utvecklingsfrågor på Handelsrådet. Och Handelsrådet, vi är en partsgemensam stiftelse, det vill säga fack och arbetsgivare inom handeln jobbar med gemensamma frågor där man är överens. Och bland annat så är vi Sveriges största privata forskningsfinansiär. Det betyder inte att vi delar ut jättemycket pengar, men de pengarna vi delar ut ger vi till handelsforskning. Och då ordnar vi den här typen av seminarier för att få ut våra forskningsresultat. Det är ju ingen nytta att det skapas en massa forskning om inte resultaten kommer ut i branschen. Och jag är jätteglad att det är så många företag här idag. I will switch into English. Crystal Abidin, she came to my office for a couple of years ago and she was like bubbling with lots of ideas. I want to do this and I want to do, can you help me with the context? Can we do this? Can we do this? And I quickly understood that she is far beyond me when it's into this social media and fashion retail, and also far beyond the Swedish retailing industry. So I'm so glad to present for you Crystal Abidin. She's from the University of Deakin and Curtin University in Australia. And she will help us to understand the influencer industry. And she will also give us some results from her postdoc project that we have been financing for a couple of years. I will keep track on time, and I promise we will start we'll end 9:30 sharp. I know that you want to go to other places and so, but Crystal has promised to stay if there are more questions and so afterwards. So, but welcome, Crystal.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dr. Crystal Abidin, and I'm a digital anthropologist. So I come from a place of academia where we do a lot of research, working with everyday young people, but specifically I work to study how young people share internet culture online. In the last 2 years, I have been working on a project specifically looking at Sweden and the Nordic region. I basically wanted to understand what the influencer industry here looks like and possibly what are the connections to the fashion industry here. To continue from this, I'm going to give you a bit of my background so that you can understand why a girl from Asia or Australia plunged herself into Sweden to do this work. So as I've mentioned, a lot of my work tends to focus on young people's internet cultures. I started this in Southeast Asia in the late 2000s, looking at how young people were selling second-hand fashion clothes online. Thereafter, I branched off to look at East Asia, Australia, and more recently, the Swedish and Nordic market. To give you an idea of what this research looks like, thank you. Here are some of the historical bits of where I've been and what I've done. The very first time I looked at anything to do with influencers, the vocabulary of influencers or social media hadn't really hit our shores yet. This was as early as in 2005, where there was a phenomenon of blog shops all throughout Southeast Asia. In those days, you would see a lot of young women modeling in their bedrooms clothes that they had owned and worn. There was really nice vocabulary for these second-hand clothes, like pre-loved, well-loved, second-hand and treasured, to give the idea that even though these clothes had been used, they were still given a second life and could be passed on a second-hand market online. Eventually, a lot of these young women who were models or owners of blog shops came to become role models on an online community. Many young people would write to them to ask for advice, but this advice was not just fashion-related. It was often to do with fitness, health, romantic relationships, recommendations of what to do in their leisurely time when they're pictured wearing their outfits. So over time in Southeast Asia, a good group of these fashion bloggers or blog shop owners became the first generation of influencers. At the same time, a lot of the young women who were selling secondhand clothes were very much appreciated for their taste. So they went to different cities in the world like Bangkok and Shenzhen to import clothes wholesale and sell them for an upmarket price. And eventually, a next batch of them began to produce their own designs. They went to fashion school, they designed their own textiles, and many of these women who started 12 or 13 years ago are now owners of some of the major fashion stores in Southeast Asia. The next part of my work focused on the second generation of women, the influencers. So although many of them started as blog shop owners, some of them were prolific when social media started coming up. They were known as the popular tweeters, they were Instagrammers with good content, maybe they were just really humorous on YouTube, so on and so forth. And I started to look at the practices of these influencers. Exactly how does one become an influencer? What skills do you need to have apart from looking presentable, technical skills, PR skills? How do you relate to your fans? How do you do damage control when your fans become haters and trolls? How do companies contact you? What does the overall industry look like? And all of that was the research I did before I came here. Later on, I branched out into a larger market in East Asia, looking at sites such as Japan, South Korea, China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And here I did digital ethnography, looking online at how these different patterns of internet celebrity were exchanged in this region. I was also really interested in what I call intra-region flows. So for the most part, when I've been teaching around the Scandic region for the last few years, if I put up a slide like this, the students often struggle to tell apart all the different nationalities in East Asia. It is the same in the reverse. I could show my students in Asia a spread of all the Nordic faces, and they will not have the ability to tell all the different nationalities apart. So I was really interested to see now the very minute and small visual differences across different industries in Japan, in Taiwan, in South Korea, to see whether or not they presented themselves differently. This was also going to inform the later stage of my fieldwork in Sweden and in the Nordic that I will touch on at the end. Last but not least, before coming here, I was also looking specifically at Australia. And here I looked at a genre of influencers who work with LGBT issues, sexuality education, or queer rights. These were not just young people who were coming out on YouTube. They were using YouTube, Instagram, Twitter as a space to share resources. Anything to do with how to practice safe sex, how to use a condom, how do you have conversations with your friends and your parents about coming out, all the way to entertaining content about maybe the first world problems that only queer young people understand, or the inside jokes that only these groups will be able to appreciate. Bearing all this in mind, I had applied for a grant, thanks to Handelsrådet, a couple of years ago to study now the influencer industry here. Now, originally, the project was going to look just at the Swedish market, but as the countries here are slightly smaller than the ones in Asia, I finished a bit quicker than expected, so I ended up doing follow-up research in Denmark, Norway, and Finland as well. So bear with me if later on, rather than just focusing on Sweden, I try to give you a bit of a regional perspective in the Nordic. This is a snapshot of what my research focused on. Earlier on, I told you I focused on the girls who are forming networks with factories. And then I moved on to the influencers themselves. And then I moved on to look at regional impressions of audiences in East Asia. And then I went on to look at influencers and their partnerships with clients. This time in Sweden, I wanted to focus on the influencer agencies. For the most part, agencies generally have two functions. Number one, they either groom, select, or try to portfolio influencers. Sometimes these influencers are easy to spot when they already have an organic following online, but sometimes these agencies pick people with potential, send them for classes, give them training, and groom them to become influencers. The second function of these influencer agencies is to promote the interests of clients, to help them do matching. If you have a product or a campaign, what sort of social media and what sort of persona can best present your message? So before I give you the results of what I've done elsewhere in the world and in Sweden, I thought I should give you a bit of background about influencers, just in case some of us in the audience here may have never encountered them. But to explain influencers, I first need to return to this larger, broader category of internet celebrity. So you've got internet celebrity as the overarching category. You have many types of internet celebrity, and one subgenre of them are influencers. Internet celebrities take on a variety of looks. Sometimes you recognize them as influencers who are famous, say, on Vine or on YouTube. Sometimes they don't even need to be human. Grumpy Cat is one of the highest earning pet influencers according to the Forbes list for the last few years. Sometimes they are popular on very specific social media platforms, not for their brand or their image, but more for their content. For example, here we've got Pakula Papito, who is supposedly an Indian man. He's really famous around students around the world because he makes very depressing but humorous first world tweets about student problems. But elsewhere, we also have internet celebrities who kind of accidentally stumble into this scene. For instance, Heidi from Taiwan, who was against her will made into a meme. And this meme was taken in not a very nice light. She ended up receiving a lot of trolling, a lot of death threats, even though she didn't voluntarily want to become an internet celebrity. So as you can see, the idea of celebrity is quite separate from intention, is quite separate from the quality of your fame. It's also quite separate from your ability to make money or be an endorser. So I came up with this framework in my larger research. The basis of internet celebrities are that they are native to the internet. They start organically on the internet and they grow from there. Many of them may go on to star in Hollywood, television, cross over to the traditional industry, but it's important that they are rooted on the internet space, because this makes them very distinct and different from, say, Hollywood celebrities who sometimes go on social media to connect with their fans. Internet celebrities are also premised on having high visibility. They are seen a lot by two factions. Number one, they are seen a lot by the human eye. That means they're able to capture our attention and we voluntarily want to watch them. We may want to watch them because we enjoy them, but these days we also sometimes watch internet celebrities because they disgust us, we don't understand them, we want to look away but we just cannot. So I'm just leaving this as a very neutral term, high visibility. The second faction that requires more technical skills is that these internet celebrities need to capture the eye of the machine. We need to understand how different algorithms work on different platforms, because nowadays we no longer get served content in a chronological order. For you to want to appear on the Facebook feed or on Instagram's Discover page, there are many different strategies that influencers play with in order to capture the algorithmic eye. The third condition is that they must have an audience, because I could be the best, most beautiful looking YouTuber producing hundreds of videos, but if no one looks at me, then there is no acknowledgement that I'm performing. And the last thing to consider is that depending on your market, the ideologies and the tastes of your audience may differ. So something that may be really common and normal in Sweden that will not capture anyone's attention can be transplanted, maybe put it in East Asian market, and then suddenly be very popular there because they've got different tastes. They may find it exotic. They may find it more interesting. So these days, we also realize that the quality of internet celebrity is not just stuck to the performer. It depends on your audience. And sometimes my success would change depending on who this audience makeup is. For you to understand a little bit more, you may want to read up about meme personalities. I won't touch very much on them, but to give you a brief heads up, there are varieties of them that engage with celebrity differently. Some meme celebrities just end up being the face of a meme. You look at them, you recognize that they're a meme, you may understand what the meme is about, and that's it. You don't actually know more about this person. You may not even know their real name. Some meme celebrities who, after they gain popularity, try to cultivate some sort of a persona after the meme, and then they may like to perform as an influencer and try and monetize their fame. But of course, the success of this also differs. And as I've mentioned previously, some other celebrities become memes against their will, And even when they want to opt out and truncate their fame, they're unable to do so. So for instance, in Sweden, one of the most popular internet celebrities is not a person, it's a Twitter account. For those of us who are not familiar, I highly encourage you to check out the account @Sweden on Twitter. The initiative has now closed after 7 years, but for a good 7 years, every couple of weeks or so, one ordinary average Swedish citizen was allocated a time period to manage Sweden's official Twitter account. The content here varied. There were instances where you had grandmothers who were showing people the gardens and the fruits and vegetables they were growing. You also had young adventure people who were going hiking, climbing mountains, showing different sites of Sweden. You also had parents who were showing what kindergarten life might look like with their kids, so on and so forth. It was a really great initiative, and they have captured the close of this in October 2018 with a video that I invite you to watch in your own time. Now that I've established what internet celebrities are, I want to explain to you how they become popular or why we are so attracted to them. There are generally 4 different categories of internet celebrities that capture our interest today. Remember earlier on, I said sometimes we like to watch them because we feel connected. Sometimes even if we don't enjoy the content, you feel like you're still stuck watching them. I'm going to tell us why. One of the most popular reasons we enjoy internet celebrity is because they give us an insight into exclusivity. These are everyday ordinary people who maybe have resources or experiences that are quite exclusive or quite rare. So when they share them, we get a sneak peek behind the scenes of this really treasured life. This is most popular on a space like Instagram, and especially if you go on the hashtag Rich Kids of Instagram, you see people sharing really, really opulent luxury, exotic baby tigers in their backyard, a young person who owns a whole fleet of luxury cars, something that captures our interests in this way. But the second quality is more mundane. It is everydayness. This is when everyday ordinary people perform practices and share them online as a way of disclosing what an everyday lifestyle could look like. They're mostly really mundane, they're mostly very normal, but the key thing is that they're very consistent. And because they upload the material very regularly, over time we start to feel an emotional connection with these people as if we really know them. Psychologists have a term for this feeling. It's called parasocial relations. The idea that you feel like you know this person very, very well just from their display of content, even if you've never met. Now, in this category, babies tend to be the best internet celebrities. If you really think about it, they're kind of easily manipulable at nap time. You see parents putting them into cosplay, but they also have routines. They have to eat at set times, they sleep at set times, they have routines at set times. So it's easier for a parent to document their growth, and therefore they happen to be one of the more popular genres in this category. The third category is exceptionalism. Here you've got everyday ordinary people who capture our attention by sharing some sort of expertise, technical skill, exceptional ability. We see this playing out a lot on a space like YouTube. YouTube is one of the few social media platforms today that still manages to voluntarily capture our attention for a long period of time. People still sit through 6-minute, 60-minute long videos, as opposed to scrolling very quickly on Facebook or Instagram after a few seconds. Some of these skills that are exceptional are quite traditional, for example, musical talents. Others are a bit more esoteric, so to say, like Miss Ye from Sichuan, whose special skill was the ability to use everyday office appliances to make a fully cooked edible meal. If you're interested, I highly recommend that you check out her videos. It's also really innovative, the way she manages to work with these to put out sponsored messages for her clients. The last quality is exoticism. This tends to apply to certain demographic of internet celebrities who capture your attention not by identifying with you, but by distancing themselves. So you watch them because you don't understand them. You watch them because you're curious, or you watch them simply because you can't look away. It's something that's just so intriguing that you cannot understand. An example that I have in my case study that's not on screen is Dr. Pimple Popper. She is the doctor in the US who's really known on YouTube for taking close-up videos of popping people's pimples and squeezing out all the stuff in your skin. It sounds gross, but she's got millions and millions of followers and viewers, and it's one of those really interesting human grotesque aspects where we hate watch something or we continue to stay fixated on something even though it really terrifies us. But here, these are two examples from East Asia. We've got Kinoshita Yuka from Japan, who is known as a mukbang eater. It is a South Korean method of entertainment online where people binge eat a lot of food all at once. Now, she's especially popular on YouTube because many of these mukbang eaters are often men or larger in size. But Kinoshita Yuka is a really small-sized Asian woman, so when she's able to fit 48 pieces of KFC into her body in one sitting, it's quite surprising to people who want to continue watching. We also have Shori, that's how you spell her name. I also highly encourage you to check her out. She's a very interesting character in South Korea, and her trope is this. Usually there's some music playing in the background, and she's just dancing for a while. And when it comes to the exciting part of the music, she takes out some food item and starts dancing with it and rubbing it against her body and costume. But the foods and her costumes are always in theme with the music. She was in a fridge here, hugging a ginormous fish, wearing a mermaid costume, and the soundtrack was Under the Sea from the Disney movie The Little Mermaid. At first glance, all of you here look very concerned right now, but at first glance, you have no idea what she's selling you. Is it the fridge? Is it the fish? Is it the mermaid costume? What she's intending for you to do as an audience is to watch her video, be extremely confused, and then hopefully click into her username. When you do so on her YouTube channel, you will see that these clickbait videos where she dances with food are very nicely spread out every few videos or so, and they serve as funnels. They're meant to catch your interest so that you go to a YouTube channel, but the rest of her videos are more traditional as an influencer, where she does vlogs, she does reviews, and she promotes other things to you. So even though these clickbait videos per se may not be sponsored or may not promote anything to you, they do a very good job of capturing your attention and then filtering you to the content in which she makes her money. All right, let's take a deep breath. Everyone looks very concerned. But I hope you enjoy gliding through the internet looking at these case studies. So I've established to you so far what internet celebrities look like, the 4 different reasons we're attracted to them. Now I'm going to zoom in on one specific subset, and these are your influencers. Earlier on, I talked to you about high visibility. I said that internet celebrities can be popular for many different reasons. For influencers, these reasons are more specific. For instance, internet celebrities can be popular online for fame or infamy. Influencers would generally try to go for the more positive fame. Internet celebrities may have fame that is sustained or short-lived and transient. Influencers tend to go for the more sustained one. So you'll see that all these attributes that I put in bold are the one that influencers tend to lean towards. What exactly influencers do, though, is to produce everyday ordinary content based on their lifestyles, sometimes based on their skill or expertise. And once they have captured an optimum or sizable audience, a critical mass of sorts, they can then work with clients to embed sponsored messages into their content. I don't want us to think about sponsored messages just as shampoo or cat food, because in this age, sponsored messages can also be astroturfing or seeding political intention. It could be shaping an idea of a politician who's about to go for an election. It could be shaping public sentiment about how we feel about a specific migrant group. And sometimes we don't even realize that these are what influencers are doing, because the vehicles in which they give us this information are clouded in humor. They may come in the form of memes. They may come in the form of viral videos. So we don't really think about this in depth. It just feels like we're consuming internet pop culture. But if you spend a long time watching the patterns and how they redirect attention and spotlight to some issues, you realize that influencers are really experts in science communication who can channel attention and resources to some things and then bury our interest in other things along the way. For those of us who are interested with working with influencers, there are generally 5 different categories now. These numbers I've put here are scaled for the Nordic market, and in a while I'll explain why it is important to remember the context. We have now about 5 different categories of influencers based on their critical mass of followers or viewers. Anywhere from the nano influencer, who's got fewer than 1,000 followers, to the mega influencer, who's got more than 1 million. Now, as I said earlier, this is scaled for Nordic markets because the countries here are generally quite small. If you've got a population of 4 million people and 1 million of them follow an influencer, that's effectively 25% of your population that can be persuaded to do something. But if I were to scale for a country or geographical region, 1 million followers is just a drop in the ocean for a market like China or India. And having 1 million followers may place someone maybe only in the nano or micro categories. We also need to scale for platform. On a place like Vine, which used to be around, so RIP Vine, having 1 million revines or views was really significant because it was still a subcultural app that spoke to young people. It wasn't a mainstream app that people of all ages used. But if we were to scale for something more prominent like Twitter or YouTube, 1 million views may be so much more easy to attain, and therefore having 1 million views may scale them down here instead. So take into consideration those 2 vectors. In terms of function, generally your mega and your macro influencers these days serve as amplifiers of information. If you were to think about it as a structure, they are a platform that can amplify and really showcase information through their audiences much more effectively. So sponsors work with them and input a message, and they're kind of like a loud hailer or a speaker that can disseminate it a lot more widely. Not too different from your broadcast media. But if you go down to your smaller scale one, these influencers have got a smaller group of followers but a tighter relationship with them. They resemble more of your word-of-mouth conversions. They may not have the scale, but the conversions from, say, click-throughs to sales or viewership to click-throughs might have a higher turnover rate. So these days, many clients who can afford it try and work with a combination of mega to nano influencers because their functions are very different. I won't go very into depth on this, but this was a snapshot of my fieldwork in Singapore. Just to give you an idea, in the industry, you have anyone from the influencers to the managers to the accounts and tech people, software engineers, and the clients. So if you're interested, I'm very happy to chat about the larger industry. Other trends to take note of. These days, the effectiveness of influencers is not purely measured based on their financial income, on the Forbes list, for instance. It's not also purely measured based on their viewership. We have mega award shows like Influence Asia that honors the best influencers across 8 Asian countries, and sometimes they are honored for things like their positive impact on the community, the types of messages they push through, their leadership in the influencer industry when they try to change things, for instance, shift towards sustainable fashion as opposed to fast fashion. So if you're a company that works with KPIs and influencers, there are also ways that we need to rethink how we measure success these days. Not so much focus on the money or the viewership, but maybe more on the intangible qualities of influencers and their impact. The final thing I want to look at from this section is the attention to platforms. A lot of influencers feel very vulnerable to social media, even though they make their livelihood on it. This is because every small change in an algorithm or any small change in a feed can greatly affect their business. When Instagram allowed clients and companies to now buy ad space, native advertising, many influencers lost a sizable portion of their income because they were cut out of that circuit. Similarly, when on Facebook these days, there are these influencer fraud companies or fraud companies that sell clicks for a very, very low price, Many influencers and clients also receive fake reviews. They may wake up to hundreds of one-star reviews from fake clients or fake customers, and that brings down the overall reputation of their brand name on social media. It's not something they can control. It's something that they can try and do some sort of report against, but for the most part, the damage is done once it's been registered. I want to now move on to the second of the 3 parts of today. I'm going to tell us a little bit about the algorithmic practices of these influencers in the climate of machine vision and also fraud. So I'm going to show you some examples of how popular privatized meme pages or popular Facebook pages that sell products, not necessarily by influencers, try and capture our attention today. If you are a user of Facebook, you will realize that Facebook videos now tend to play automatically. When you scroll through a video feed and it's there, it starts playing the first few seconds unless you scroll away. And to stop this, you have to go manually into your settings to say, do not autoplay video. So over time, all these Facebook users like you and I, we come to understand the norm is for the video to play automatically. I'm going to do this slide instead. However, not everyone understands that sometimes the play button is different. On Facebook, the play button generally looks like this. It's white and translucent. Some of us who are not familiar with this may come across images as such. When you see a ginormous play button and you see a picture and it's not auto-playing, you may think that maybe your Facebook video is broken. Maybe there's something wrong with your app. And you may click on this picture only to realize it is just a still image that leads to a URL and you would have entered another website. This is one of the ways some popular Facebook pages try and game the inattention of consumers or followers, hoping that maybe if you're not paying attention, you would click through and add to their viewership, thinking that the algorithm has not worked for you. In the other instance, there's also a lot of folklore around what types of content gets ranked differently on Facebook. In general, a lot of the influencer agencies and marketing people I've spoken to feel that number one, Facebook videos get priority, and then images, and then your text post. So for this reason, even if influencers just want to put a status update, they may put a picture, sometimes not even related to the content, on their posts in order to be ranked higher. In the same way, many meme pages who make money off advertising things sometimes only have a still image. But to trick the algorithm into thinking it is a video, they add this translucent overlay. These triangles are supposed to be moving. They're not moving, so like maybe shift your head so they look like they're moving. These floaty triangles are a filter they added across a picture so that it seems as though this is a video to the machine. But as a viewer, to you, this is just a picture with really annoying ghost triangles floating around. That doesn't really matter though, because it has helped to rank these posts higher up on the Facebook feed. Another way that they have tried to game the idea of live videos is through a combination of sound and timestamps. This was a GIF of a hurricane that was constantly churning and churning and churning. At the bottom here, there was a sticker or a post that said it was live. And overlaid onto this was a soundtrack of cows mooing, the wind howling, cars honking. So if you didn't really pay attention, you would feel convinced that you really were looking at a live storm happening as it unfolded. But if you stayed long enough, you would realize that the image of the storm was being repeated. The cow and the car honk was continuously repeated after a fixed interval. And this was all actually a loop. But many people who scroll through Facebook don't spend this much time on a post to realize this. And so a combination of the GIF, the sound, and the stamp gave people an impression that it was live, and it chalked up hundreds and thousands of hits and likes just in 24 hours. Three more examples. Now this time looking at Twitter and on Instagram. On Instagram now, there is this notion that in order to get your posts featured on a Discover page or the live feed, you have to be able to capture engagements in the first few minutes after you put out your post. To do this, many influencers have formed self-amplification groups called Instagram pods or Instapods. Pods is the vocabulary taken from dolphins. When dolphins migrate in the sea, there's generally a huge family of them that go together. But in this huge family, there are also small categories of maybe 6 to 12 dolphins or so. I'm making these numbers up from my memory. I'm not like a dolphin expert. But about a smaller group of 6 to 12 dolphins who maybe travel in a small family. In the same way, many influencers are in a large pack on a social media platform, but they may have their small in-groups on private messaging apps. What usually happens is before one of these influencers is going to put an Instagram post, they will go to the chat and inform their friends that in the next 2 minutes, they have to engage with your post. So you put up an Instagram post and your pod members go up and like and comment in the first 2 minutes or so. Because these other pod members are also influencers with high follower counts, the machine on Instagram reads it as if your post is significantly valued by valuable members of the community and that your engagement is organic. It is, after all, not triggered by bots, it's not triggered by machines, it's humans manually going to engage with your post, even though you have organized this behind the scenes. But this is still one of the ways that influencers have stayed away from fraud, technically, but also still worked with others in order to boost their post. Elsewhere, we have productive drama. Now, our clients and our followers on Instagram are becoming very, very smart. They're also becoming very, very bored. Because just about any influencer who is able to break the threshold these days looks beautiful, is gorgeous, is really savvy with their content. So in other words, influencers have to strategize to come up with extra content or Easter eggs to capture their attention. One of the ways these plays out is when influencers have drama, scandals, or wars. In this example here, I trace chronologically 2 groups of influencers who had some conflict with each other. In each of these instances, none of these posts were hashtagged, they did not refer to each other, and the only way I managed to capture this chronological thing was because I had background information and I traced them very, very in-depth during this time. So you would see in these captions that the influencers were being very vague. They were referring to some sort of conflict. Sometimes it sounded like a quote from a Hallmark card. But if you had a bit of background and could corroborate all the different sources, you would realize that they were speaking about the same scandal or the same conflict. This background or this shadow economy of followers massively Googling or trying to uncover the mystery is now a game for many followers, i.e., they consume not just the post, they are consuming these interconnected networks between influencers to try and CSI or find out what is the real gossip behind the scenes. The last way all these influencers try to work with algorithms is by playing with the idea of witching hour. How many of you here have heard of witching hour? Like one person. Witching hour originally came from the Roald Dahl book, the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant. In that storybook, if I recall, it's that time when everyone is asleep and it's very quiet and mysterious, and then the BFG comes out to roam the streets. In the same way, witching hour on a place like Instagram is the dead hour where there is no activity. It's generally about the times from 2 to 6 a.m., where marketeers, social media experts tell you to not put any content online, because no one is going to see it, no one is going to engage with it, and then your content is just going to be absorbed into a black hole. The shelf life or the expiration date of your post will get truncated, and that's it, buried by the algorithm. However, sometimes during contentious periods where there is drama, or when influencers and clients sometimes get into scandals online, witching hour is exactly when all the important content gets posted. I took these screen grabs from a specific hashtag in the 2 to 6 a.m. time slot where one influencer was being attacked by others. They were calling each other out on a variety of things ranging from integrity to various types of sexual morality. If you happen to be awake at 2 to 6 a.m. and you see such posts, as a follower in this industry, your initial instinct is to quickly take screen grabs because you know this is precious gold. You don't regularly see this. Come 6 a.m., when normal human society wakes up, what usually happens is the original poster of such contentious content would then delete everything. So what do you have left to count on if you have just woken up and you've heard about a big scandal? All you have to see is the second-hand screen grabs floating around from many people. If you are a user of the internet, you understand just how frustrating it is when you are searching for something and you can't go to the original source, when you only see a second-hand source or a screen grab. So this entices a whole throng of viewers to now very intensively Google to see if they can find any additional information. They may even go to Yahoo, they may even use Bing to see if they come up with different results. And this kind of artificially increases the SEO index ranking of this keyword or this influencer. So that's the last of the algorithmic strategies. I have about 7 more minutes, and now I want to give you a bit of an introduction to some of the research I've done in Sweden. Now, my data collection has been completed, but I'm still working on the analysis. So here I'm offering you some initial findings before I can fine-tune my work. I've been working with various parts of the influencer agency, mainly interviews with the agencies. I've also done quite a bit of brainstorming with startup incubators and industry hubs. They are important because sometimes they groom influencers, and some other times they shape how clients work with influencers. I've gone through 3 different second-hand shops around Sweden and conducted 6 rounds of surveys with customers. This was a particular company that had a social media campaign, and I wanted to know whether the young people who came into the store did so because they were funneled there via the campaign or whether for other reasons. I also consulted a lot of reports and best practices handbooks from various influencer agencies in the Nordic market. And what I feel was most important to me was 6 rounds of case studies that I held with different undergraduates all throughout the Nordic region. Now, I like to think that I'm still a young person and the internet is my expertise, so I know it very well. But having spent time with these classes of undergrads, I got to understand how the 17 to the 25-year-olds engaged with influencers, how they saw their strategies, whether or not it was still cool or in vogue to follow some platforms over others. Although I'm not going to be able to share all the findings, if there's anything you're interested from these specific methods, I'll be very happy to chat. This was my basic question. What does the influencer industry look like in Sweden and the Nordic, especially in relation to the fashion industry? One of my most precious findings was the different models of influencer agencies we had in this part of the world. I show here a sample of 7 different agencies from Sweden to showcase what these types might look like. You can have an agency like Cure. Cure is your typical influencer agency where they groom, they harness talents, they portfolio them. You can go to them as a client and they'll recommend the best fit for you. You also have an agency like Cube, who doesn't really only focus on influencers, but they groom all-rounded personalities. They train the people that they work with to be ready for radio, television, public speaking, so they're kind of all-rounders in the sense of being grassroots celebrities. Loppy is one of my favorites. Before social media hit this part of the world and before influencers were a common career path, parenting blogging was actually really, really popular in Sweden and in Norway as early as in 2005. So after this group of parent bloggers were somehow displaced by social media influencers, a network like Loppy came together to reinvigorate them. Loppy is an influencer network dedicated specifically to parenting bloggers. So all the products, all the messages that are vetted through them are for a specific demographic, but they also have a very long ethical and good integratorial history of the types of products they work with that have been certified by parents. A 4th model is something like United Screens. Instead of focusing on a demographic, they focus on a specific platform, which is YouTube. At any one time, they contract about 550 YouTubers in the Nordic, in Europe, and a few around the world. And they are experts in learning the trends in YouTube culture. They're also experts in teaching these influencers how to produce their videos. We have Buzzador. They focus on a different demographic of influencers, not on your content, not on your platform, but on the number of followers you have. Buzzador focuses on micro-influencers, so people who've got a couple of thousand or maybe even fewer than 1,000 followers can sign up for an account with them, choose to receive free product samples in their mail, and in exchange for receiving these free gifts, they have to put out a few reviews on social media. Although many of the Buzzador micro-influencers are not paid by money, they are happy to just get these products in exchange. Some of these micro-influencers use these product samples as a way to build their portfolio or practice producing content, and as their followers grow, they may eventually graduate to other agencies or graduate up the rank of influencers. The sixth one, I'm going to not pronounce this correctly because my Swedish is horrible, but I think you call it Nöjesguiden, the nightlife magazine. So it is a magazine that you're able to get all around Stockholm, and they are a firm that is stationed not too far away. They also have a website where they put together the best of nightlife that you can get together. But we also understand that in the age of social media, very few young people actually go to a computer and look at a website anymore. So they have in-house influencers who focus on putting content on social media to attract people back to their website. The last model is something like Relatable. They are an influencer marketing agency that focuses more on the back end of things. They would perhaps put together client portfolios, track the metrics, track the back end engagement rates of influencers so that you can use them in complement with all these other companies. I'm going to give us 3 provocations and then to end. These are things for us to think about. Number 1, specific to the fashion industry part of my research, we need to rethink a bit about the ethics of the industry. We are using a lot of influencers to promote fast fashion brands, and it's true that they have the great ability to channel attention to your brand. But often, we now see companies that are focused on sustainability, circular production, conscious line, also working with the same group of influencers, although not very successfully. The main reason being there's an incongruence with the biography. You simply cannot have an influencer that you engage to promote sustainability for a month, and then in the next month, the exact same influencer goes on to publicize other fast fashion brands. So that big contradiction doesn't make their following feel loyal or doesn't make their content feel authentic. So we have to think about new KPI models. I've met with several startups who want to introduce sustainable influencer practices as their mainstay, or for instance, measuring the impact not by sales, but by the quality of an influencer's moral message. Second provocation. In general, YouTube tends to be the dominant platform in the Nordic region. If we look at fashion specifically, it may be Instagram, but across all genres, it is YouTube. In the Nordic market, most influencers still tend to use their own languages, whether it's Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, or Finnish. But some influencers tend to have really good partnerships. In particular, the Swedish and Danish influencers may put dual subtitles, and their audiences cross over a lot better, whereas a lot of Norwegian YouTubers somehow only stay within their own language. We also want to think about the visual images that we're putting out. For the most part, as I've said, my students in Asia cannot tell apart the Nordic influencers, and the Nordic influencers themselves struggle to set themselves apart nationally. But in the grand scheme of things, there are a lot of minority influencers who are not your stereotypically white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed influencers who do not get seen often, either because companies want a Nordic stereotypical image and don't work with them, or that they struggle to break into the algorithmic structures. So if there's anything we can do now, I think it's to improve the diversity and the representation, because this accurately reflects your consumer base. My last provocation has to do with very young children. Mommy bloggers and parenting influencers have a long history in Sweden. It is also a very special country here where you've got this radical transparency of personal data. I can Google any of our names and you can see how much we earn in salary, our address, our telephone number. It is a very great trust society where everyone is comfortable with the government collecting this on an equal level. But at the same time, you're also governed by great privacy laws with the GDPR and in the EU. So it's a combination of both. For me, the next step will be to consider, what about child influencers? Do they have the right when they want to be put online? Do they reach a certain age and discover that their entire childhoods have been put online and monetized? What can we do right now to think about new regulation and welfare? And if there's any country in the world that can start having this conversation on a large scale, I think all the right things are in place here in Sweden and in Scandinavia. That's it for me. Thank you for paying attention, and I'll hand the time back to Lina.
Thank you so much. I have enjoyed this talk so much, and I wonder if you have done that too. Maybe there are some questions. I have a few.
Yep.
I know there's a lot of companies here, and I wonder what would your tip be to if they want to start using influencers for their commercial ideas and so?
Yeah. Two
have a
tips,
list, yeah.
maybe. One, in terms of the culture, I think if you have worked with influencers or you're thinking about working with influencers, as a company, you have a lot of great power in controlling the diversity of representation. So for instance, not just in Sweden, but all throughout Europe, we focus on the blonde, blue-eyed, white-skinned, young, skinny woman as the atypical influencer. But if you want to be true to your target demographic, if you want to be a company that's truly diverse for your clientele, then also work with these diverse influencers. They are out there. It's not difficult to find them, but they may not be promoted by the feed or promoted by the company because they don't have as many followers or viewers as the atypical Nordic model. Economically, if you are starting to work with influencers, I highly suggest to minimize your risk by doing intensive Googling. Check their background history, make sure that they've got a clean record, but also you want to make sure that the morals and the values they carry in their private lives are congruent with your brand. I have met with several clients who maybe work with influencers to promote a healthy lifestyle. They sell active foods. But if you scroll back a few posts, the Instagrammer is seen partying with alcohol and cigarettes. So it's not a competitor product per se, but it's something that will not fit with that model of the lifestyle your company is representing.
Other questions?
Hi. Have you looked into some artificial influencers? And what's the future for that?
Right. In my other works, I don't have the slides here, I've looked at virtual influencers. The most common name that we may have heard of today is Lil Michaela. She is the product of a company called Brud, B-R-U-D. For a long time, when she was put on Instagram, if you looked at her face, you couldn't tell if she was human or machine, if this person had great makeup skills or was just like amazing selfie filters. So for a very long time, her draw factor, her clickbait, like Shori and the fish, was that people were trying to speculate whether or not she was human. And it was eventually revealed that she was actually VR. She's virtually created in that image. Later on in the second stage, a lot of the speculations were her race, her identity, and her political affiliations. All at once, people thought she was Asian, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Black, Latin American, because she was so visually ambiguous. And like the high fashion models in the luxury industry, this made her very malleable for all types of messages. The third thing, which I think may be what you're considering now, is that many clients like to work with virtual influencers like her because they don't come with the human messiness. There is no chance that they're going to be spotted smoking, have drama, have scandals. It's almost as if you're creating your own entity. And that was what clients liked. But we must also remember that for the consumer, the attention span of speculating whether she was human, speculating her race, all of that interest has watered down a bit, and we're left with a smaller pool of people who are interested in the virtual life of this virtual celebrity. So if you do want to work with celebrities like that, if I was a marketing person, optimal time when this person is still at peak or in public interest is important. And if you are a client who's more concerned with ethics and culture, I'll be wondering why we want to focus on an artificially created person as opposed to actually working with the diverse influencers, an actual person of a different culture, of a different race, working with the messiness of humans who can then be better ambassadors for a message.
I also wondered, I know that you from the beginning in the postdoc project, you were supposed to look at Sweden, and then you have made the project bigger, so as you said, and look into the other Nordic countries. Are there big differences between the Nordic countries, how we work with influencers and how we use them?
So I think I mentioned a few earlier on, like language. Sweden and Denmark, not to offend the other colleagues from the other Nordic countries, are doing quite a good job at breaking out of the region. So there's interconnecting partnerships. But this really goes back to the history of, say, your film and your TV industries that have a really good partnership. You have grants specifically to produce Swedish-Danish content. Swedish and Danish influencers are also really good at being international. So they may have English subtitles, they may have English versions of their videos. Many of them may even have mirror websites. So whether I click on something.wordpress.se or blogger.dk, I can have the exact same content in English, Swedish, Danish, so on and so forth. The Norwegian and our Icelandic friends are not yet doing that to a great degree. The second thing that was interesting from the students per se, the fashion students that I interviewed, whether they were in design, in charge of marketing or merchandising, they had stereotypes about the quality and the hierarchy of influencers in the Nordic. So for the most part, many of them greatly valued the Norwegians in fashion, and they said that they're very eclectic, they're representational of this region. But my secret speculation is that because fewer people understand them from breaking through in the language, they feel a bit more unreachable or ununderstood. They felt that Sweden and Denmark were the mainstay or mainstream. So if you wanted to go for the masses, these would be a good market. And then they felt it was difficult to reach Finland and Iceland, maybe due to language or geographical distance. Another really great observation from a student that was hilarious was about fashion genres. So I'm sure all of you have heard the stereotype. It's easy to spot a non-Swedish person because they're not in black, white, or gray, right? It's like your national fashion colors. And the fashion students have made similar observations, like on Instagram. The Norwegians are very bold, but within a set limit of color. The Swedes have 3 color palettes, as do the Danes. The Danes have like 10 shades of black. But then for them, the Finnish and the Icelandic markets are now more interesting. Maybe because of their migrant history or their geolocation, they are more happy to play with color, textiles, and patterns. And they're also closer to the Baltic in the different range of visual vocabularies. So the fashion students who want to make a name for themselves struggle with wanting to break into Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, but also wanting to be eclectic elsewhere. And they end up producing 2 different lines or catering to 2 different markets. So these are from my interviews with students. They're really great. I hope to be able to code them better and give you more factual information that will be useful.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Otherwise, I think we really thank Crystal with a big applause.
Thank you, everyone.